So we're going to begin with a little piece of music. It's a piece of music by Moby, which is called Almost Home, so very relevant. So I invite you to just relax where you are, let go of whatever has been going on during the day today, and just settle into this little space that we've got together now this evening. Well, home. It's a lovely word, isn't it? Laura Ingalls, who was famous from Little House on the Prairie, said it's the nicest word there is. Well, I certainly agree with that, but I think that home means different things to different people, really. Maybe for most of us, it is the nicest word. But for some people, certainly childhood home wasn't necessarily a nice or a happy place. For some people, the home they grew up in was a place of conflict, perhaps even a place of abuse, a place where people felt neglected or overlooked or restricted by what was expected of them, what they could or couldn't do. So home, we just need to acknowledge at the beginning, can mean quite a lot of things to different people. But home is greater than the home that we grew up in, our childhood home, however happy or unhappy that was. Home is a symbolic word, really, isn't it? It's a place of belonging. Home speaks to us of a place of safety, a place of rest and relaxation, of flourishing, hopefully. Maya Angelou said, the ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go exactly as we are and not be questioned. And so I'm going to show you a little film now, which is one of a series made in the United States based on interviews or perspectives with people of all ages. It's called 0 to 100. Actually, there's a guy in this film who's 105, but it's really getting perspectives on all kinds of issues from people of different ages. But this particular one, the question was, what does home mean to you? And I'll just give you one little hint as you watch it, because the 105-year-old man, and you'll know him when you see him, a gorgeous old guy, there's one little thing that he says, which is very hard to pick up. And what he says is, the good life I've lived, the good life I've lived. So take a look at this.
When you think of the word home, what do you think about?
Home, where I was born and where I was raised.
Holidays.
Chimneys and stockings and stuff.
Memories.
We had this really narrow garage. Every morning it'd be like the same thing, like wake up so-and-so to move their car.
I mostly think of like the beach.
Snow.
Whenever I take those breaths in Denver, Colorado, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is home.
There's this tree, and I would just get up there and read all the time. The food.
Bob Evans. My whole childhood, we would always go there and just have like these breakfasts on Sundays and things like that.
The smells.
The house filled with good roasting, cooking things.
I sleep in a lot, so it's always cold by the time I wake up.
My mom.
She makes really good mac and cheese.
I think of my mom's spinach and rice. Everyone would be like, what is in this? Holy crap, this is amazing.
Home is just where you make it.
Wherever my family is, we could be in an igloo. That's home.
I think I broke my mother's heart when I referred to where I live now as home.
That place where you can go when things are going crazy in the world.
When I go in and I close the door behind me, and it's quiet and I'm all alone in there, and I love that.
That is the one place I can really trust, that I can go back and relax.
In my room, how it's like really cute. Warm, cozy, comforters.
My bed. I liked being tucked in it at night.
I'm really close with my mom, so I think about sitting around the kitchen table and having chats with her.
When I'm going to sleep, she tells me a story.
Baking with my grandkids.
I think about playing the piano.
My little kitty cats that I live with.
When I play basketball with my brother, I feel like I'm at home.
The thing that always sticks with me is the people that were in my life.
My family.
And a lot of times family is not blood related.
Good friends. My dolls. I love them.
I've just come in contact with tons of people that I just know are meant to be in my life for the rest of it.
When I think about home, what a good life I've had.
It really is just where the people that I love are, you know, so we can make a home in a tent and we can make a home in a mansion, but it's got to be the people that I love. They've got to be present.
So pancake, subscribe.
Like that bit. Yeah, so I think a couple of things that strike me watching that is I love that the 105-year-old man saying, what does home mean to him? It means the good life that he's had. And wow, that's a very precious thing, isn't it? I think it also strikes me that although these are clearly all American people and our cultures are somewhat different, that actually it's all pretty much the same. You know, there's a commonality, a universality about what the word home symbolizes to us, what it engenders in us. And I think what it also makes me think about is how simple most of those things were. They weren't expensive things. They weren't things that required something enormous to achieve. They were just the ordinary simple things that most of us, thankfully, can take for granted. And yet there are many people in our world who, for all kinds of reasons, don't enjoy those simple things or have had them taken away, whether that's because they are actually homeless or people who've been displaced, refugees, whatever, or people who just aren't in warm, loving homes. So I'd like us right at the beginning to take a moment and think about those people. So if you've got a candle handy, then I'd invite you to light it now as we just think about people who don't enjoy these simple things in life that most of us take for granted. And so take a moment to think about them, maybe people that you know who are like that. But whoever they are, just send out a little love as you light a flame or look at this flame for a few moments. So we heard all of those people speaking, but I wonder, what is home to you? How would you answer that question? If we were all together in a room, I could ask you to respond to that. But I wonder what that word means to you. And just take a moment and be thankful for the blessings and the good things that you have associated with home. Now, for all kinds of reasons, we leave home, for education, for work, for going traveling, perhaps taking some time to travel. And we leave our first homes, perhaps to set up a new home when either we are setting up a home with someone, making a home together, or just because you've needed to move, you are setting up a home yourself. Sometimes we lose our sense of home, our sense of belonging, because that's really what's at the heart of it, isn't it? Somewhere to belong, for good reasons or bad reasons, through our own doings or through things that are thrust upon us, we can lose our home or lose our sense of home. The most famous story of this, of course, particularly to those of us who are familiar with the Bible, is the story of the prodigal. Someone who chose to leave home and go out pursuing whatever it was he was after. And the prodigal story really is a metaphor for all kinds of wandering from and longing for home. And so it's interesting, we've been here in the Holy Shed, which is where I'm sitting right now, for a couple of years now. And I've had so many people send me messages to say that the Shed has become a place where they belong, that they feel this is somewhere where they can, even though it's a metaphorical thing, they can feel a space to be. And in the Shed, we've been talking about parables over the past couple of weeks, and how parables are not literal stories, they're extended metaphors, really. Enigmatic Jewish wisdom tales, stories, poems, evocative art forms, really. So no wonder that so many artists have played around with the prodigal. And so I'm going to show you a few images that over the years and centuries, in many different cultures and different styles, people have portrayed the story of the prodigal, and we'll look at that with a little bit of help from Coldplay to guide us home.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in rivers, and the tears come streaming down your face, when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste, could it be worse? Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. when you're too in love to let it go. But if you never try, you'll never know just what you want. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. Tears stream down your face when you lose something you cannot replace. Tears stream down your face, tears stream down your face. I promise you I will learn from your mistakes. Tears stream down your face, lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you.
So home, as I say, is somewhere to belong. But it's about a sense of belonging, not just about a physical place. And as one of the women said in the film we watched earlier, it isn't necessarily a kind of biological thing where we belong. And, you know, in churches and other communities, people often find that that's really what brings them a sense of belonging. And I love the idea of being fixed. And I have to say that over the years, I've been fixed a lot of times. I've been fixed in my home with my family, with my wife. Pat has fixed me more times than I could possibly remember. Somehow, at times, the world messes us up, screws us up, makes us feel battered and bruised, and our egos drooping or whatever it is. And home is a place of belonging, whatever that means to you or to me. It's somewhere where there are people who are ready to help fix us, not in a kind of interfering way, but just through embracing us, through love, through what was expressed in quite a lot of those pictures that we have just looked at. But as the prodigal son teaches us, that story teaches us, belonging can be lost, whether that, as I say, is of our own doing or something that's thrust upon us. There are times in life when we need to journey home to find our sense of belonging, to find our place of security, our orientation again. And so that's not something that's once and for all in our life. There are lots of times, different occasions when we feel lost or exiled from things that are important and precious to us, perhaps exiled from our own selves, from our own inner center. I think those are the hardest things to deal with, when we feel alienated from our own inner self through circumstances or situations or whatever. And one of my favorite poets is a guy called David White. If you're familiar with him, if you've been in the shed, you'll be familiar with him. And I wanted to show you a little bit of him talking, where he's not actually talking, he's not actually giving a poem, but he's talking about this subject of belonging and coming home. And he's a man who I like so much because I always feel he's got a lot of wisdom in him. He often says that his own kind of background is a mixture, that his mother was from Ireland, and he inherited with her a whole pile of that sort of enchanted, mystical magic of Ireland. And his father was a Yorkshireman, and he said from him he got the sort of gritty earthiness. And so a lot of his work and his thinking and his poetry is a mix of those two things.
To feel as if you belong is one of the great triumphs of human existence, and especially to sustain a life of belonging and to invite others into that has always been acknowledged as one of the great achievements of human existence. But it's interesting to think that our vulnerabilities, our sense of slight woundedness around not belonging, is actually one of our core competencies. That though the crow is just itself, and the stone is just itself, and the mountain is just itself, and the cloud and the sky is just itself, we are the one part of creation that knows what it's like to live in exile. And that the ability to turn your face towards home is one of the great human endeavors and the great human stories. It's interesting to think that no matter how far you are away from yourself, no matter how exiled you feel from your contribution to the rest of the world or to society, that as a human being all you have to do is enumerate exactly the way you don't feel at home in the world, to say exactly how you don't belong. And the moment you've uttered the exact dimensionality of your exile, you're already taking the path back to the way, back to the place you should be. You're already on your way home.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think perhaps another word for being exiled is being disorientated, being thrown off course, or losing our sense of perspective. And in a way, that's something that we've all been through in this country and around the world over the past couple of years. That's something that the coronavirus did for us. It completely skewed our whole sense of perspective, and the world for a little while became really weird. And I don't think any of us will forget those first 2 or 3 months of lockdown back at the beginning of 2020, when the world was just weird. And yes, looking back now, we can see some really good things. We found, perhaps in a fresh way, our sense of home, our sense of belonging in the natural world. And in fact, that was part of our healing. That was salvation, I think, for a lot of people, to suddenly feel connected to the world, because actually, to many other aspects of the world to which we belonged, we suddenly felt disconnected and dislocated. And alongside of that, there was an immense amount of apprehension, there was fear, there was panic. I think back to some of those evenings sitting in our room down here in Somerset with Pat and suddenly having a panic attack. And that's not something that happens to me a lot, but I definitely experienced that because somehow you were disorientated, you were in a somewhat dark place in terms of you couldn't see the same landscape anymore. And it became quite frightening because there was this dark kind of threat that was lingering around. So we've gone through a couple of years actually of being thrown, of being dislocated, and we've had a couple of journeys back in and then suddenly being back out again. So there are all kinds of aspects of life, things that we go through where we're knocked. Our sense of self-worth or self-confidence is knocked. Our sense of belonging is knocked. And suddenly we need to find our way back home again. Probably one of the greatest experiences of that in life is bereavement. Because to begin with, when we lose someone important to us, it feels as if the whole landscape has changed. We're suddenly all at sea, you know, and it can be like we've been sliced right down the middle and we don't know where we are with the whole thing. And I think it's very helpful, you know, what David White said, that vulnerability is such an intrinsic part of who we are. It's that sense of vulnerability that can help actually to point us to home. It gives us the impetus to look for home. And I loved the fact that he said that as soon as you actually identify what it is that you're feeling, what it is that you're going through, how you feel alienated, that you're actually already on the way home. Now, a lot of people I know over the years have felt deeply disorientated in their faith journey. I have spent hours and hours and hours over decades now with people who feel that the world of faith that they had perhaps grown up with or which they'd become accustomed to suddenly unraveled and things didn't make sense anymore. And suddenly you don't know, you know, what do I make of the Bible anymore? What do I make of God or Jesus or anything? It's so the ground has suddenly become all squidgy all over the place. And so for lots of us, this finding our way home is deeply relevant to the faith journey. That is a journey home to a place spiritually and theologically where we can feel at home, feel, this is it. And it's not that every question will be answered, far from it, but somehow we feel we're getting in line with our inner compass again. Our orientation is there. And that's something that I think many of us could identify with. Sometimes at Soul Space and in the Shed, I've played music from Empty Hands Music, which is basically a collective of people who have a connection with an ashram in India. And one of the key people is a singer called Nemo. And he's a really interesting and lovely person. And there's a song he's only just put out quite recently, which describes his spiritual journey toward home, of how from the place where, to begin with, everything was sort of handed down to him. There was this legacy he'd inherited, but then it began to sort of unravel. And so it's a lovely, beautiful, honest song of his journey that I think probably many of us will identify with.
Dear God, I found my way home, I found my way home, I found my way home. Dear God, I found my way home, I found my way home.
Dear God, growing up I always prayed, said your name probably over 100 times a day. Never met you, couldn't see you, but had a lot of faith. Thank Mom and Dad for introducing us at a young age. As I grew a little older though, so did my mind. Curiosity turned to skepticism in due time. Began questioning all the rituals and little rhymes from the sacred books. They said you wrote each and every line. How could you? But they said you did, so you must have. Wasn't 100% sure, but in them I trusted. So I bowed, kneeled, sat in silence and even read. Went to the temple and prayed every night right before bed. Looking back now, I'm not really sure what prayer meant. I guess closing my eyes and doing what other people said, and asking for things like any other kid. Interest in the relationship that you and I had, huh?
Hold my hand, so I don't walk alone. Call your name, don't know where to go. I found my way, I found my way, I found my way home. Now I'm yours again.
By the time I got to college, God, I prayed much less, except for before eating. Understandable, I guess. See, I wasn't clear from the start as to who you really were. Then I saw and heard so much fear, it all became a blur. I thought religion was supposed to be pure and not bad. And when I saw people use your name in vain, it made me sad. And that was just the start. Even worse was segregation. Temple, mosques, church, synagogues, and different congregations. They all spoke your gospel, even posted up your paintings. But behind your name, in the dark, they murdered and defamed. Instead of love, God, intolerance and greed has pervaded. Hollow in the marketing, but shallow in the faith. I was jaded, God, didn't really understand the reason how all your children in your name could dare commit treason. So I kept my distance and just prayed that one day you'd bring it all together in my heart and just explain.
Hold my hand, so I don't walk alone. Call your name, don't know where to go. I found my way, I found my way, I found my way home. Now I'm yours again.
When I hit 30, God, the clouds started to part. The answers started seeping in. I think you heard my call. You started showing up everywhere, not only when I'd fall, but every small blessing, I could start to feel it all. The love, the patience, the angel, the Satan. How we're all sinners who fall but get up to be saints. The humility, the grace, acceptance of all the change. Suddenly not being kind started to feel strange. You used to be a statue, but not anymore. I see you more outside those walls than inside those doors. Your mother nature, the sun, the water, and the dirt. My enemy, my best friend, what hits me at my core. Most of all, you're my teacher to be a better soul. Falling down, getting up, so every moment I can grow. You are in me, God. You are the deepest root. From darkness to light, you are my inner truth.
Hold my hand, so I don't walk alone. Call your name, don't know where to go. I found my way, I found my way, I found my way home. Now I'm yours again. Dear God, I found my way home, I found my way home, I found my way home. Dear God, I found my way home, I found my way home. Dear God, I found my way home, I found my way home, I found my way home. Dear God, I found my way home, I found my way home. Dear God.
Dear God,
for me, this is my personal journey with God from childhood to now. From seeing God only inside those four walls to questioning God and religion.
I chant the mantra I've been chanting all my life, and I had no clue what it meant.
To eventually, in my own heart, realizing that God is everywhere, in everyone, in everything.
Wow, I mean, flip me. What an amazing song that is. What a great story. And I love the fact that he's wrapped it all around this sort of metaphor, this theme of finding a way home. And it's kind of interesting that it's kind of like not finding your way home to where you started out, but actually from the now sense of alienation from where you started out to finding something that really fits, that feels like that's where I am, that's who I am. And he's a great, lovely guy. And I love the fact that somehow he's managed to see that journey as all part of one journey and not needing to rubbish any of it. It's a progression, but he's able to accept and affirm each step of his journey toward home, but keeps on journeying forward. And I feel that's, definitely how I look at and feel about my own spiritual journey, that at different ways along the line, you kind of, it's very easy to rubbish where you've come from, and to just think it's all dross and wish that you hadn't been kind of hoodwinked into being there. But as Pat's often said to me when I've felt that way, well, you're only who you are now because of all of that, because of what you've been through. I mean, that's why she's a lot wiser than me. But it's true that, you know, seeing that, as Nemo's saying, God is everywhere around, to actually be able to say, but God has also been everywhere in my story. God's been in the failures and the wanderings and the screw-ups and the getting things wrong, as well as in what feels like a time of arriving. Another great person that's helped me often, and I'm sure she has some of you, is Brené Brown, who is an academic researcher, a personal and social researcher, and she's looked a little bit at what this thing about belonging means, and this is a couple of thoughts that she was sharing on that theme.
Belonging. We're wired for love. We're hardwired for belonging. It's in our DNA. But let me tell you what belonging is. The opposite of belonging from the research is fitting in. That's the opposite of belonging. Fitting in is assessing and acclimating. Here's what I should say, be. Here's what I shouldn't say. Here's what I should avoid talking about. Here's what I should dress like, look like. That's fitting in. Belonging is belonging to yourself first. Speaking your truth, telling your story, and never betraying yourself for other people. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And that's vulnerable.
That is such a helpful insight, I think. You know, that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. I mean, because fitting in can look like you belong, but actually it isn't. I love that insight, that really belonging is much more to do with something internally. It's finding confidence in our own inner self rather than fitting in with what's round about. If we really want to find a sense of authentic belonging, it isn't by fitting in and acclimatizing to everything and everybody round about us. That's a kind of seductive thing that we can get caught up into, think that then we'll feel at home if we don't sort of stand out, if we don't oppose anything. But actually what she's saying is that that's the opposite. That actually is an alienating path. The real belonging comes from trusting, from my perspective, the God who is within. So, you know, I mean, we sometimes say that home is where the heart is, but that's not just a case of because that's where the people are who love us and accept it. I think if home is where the heart is, I think we have to ask, where is the heart? Where is our heart? Because that's where we'll find home. When we find our own heart, when we find what's in our heart, that is where we will find a sense of home. So, you know, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That your heart is your home. We often deny what's in our heart, conform, as Brené Brown says, lose our true selves in what others say or believe or impose upon us, whether that's family, you know, or church, or the wider culture, society, and so on. So, you know, what does it mean to return to our heart? What does that really mean? Well, there's a lovely film about a lady that I'd like to show you, which goes really right to the nub of this, I think, about trusting yourself. I think you'll enjoy this.
No, none of this was part of my plan. I pictured myself having a dignified old age. Not what I have. Let's go to the front. There There was a time in my life when I cared a lot about what people thought, trying so hard to fit the mold. Because I think we're brought up like that. We're taught that we must fall in with what society says. And if we don't, we're not going to be liked or we're going to be punished. Expectations are a trap. Don't be afraid to think for yourself and trust your own judgment and take action on that and not what other people tell you to do. Each time I took a step to break away from the norm, I felt the freedom and the joy of living that came from that. The most important thing that we have to do is learn to love being who we are. Because once we've learned to love being who we are, sets us free to just be who we are without needing anybody else, because it's so nice to be who we are. If that word love is used in its most powerful context, it's a force on the earth. Love is a force on the earth.
Thank you so much for watching this week's film, guys, and thank you for your wonderful comments down below. And if you would like to support us for less than a cup of coffee, please follow the link below to patreon.com. Thank you so much.
I love the Patreon people, and you know, they let us use the film on the proviso that we show that little bit at the end. But what a lovely woman Monica is, and pointing us again to this thing of trusting our own inner self. And you might think that all of that is pointing us towards a kind of individualism. I don't think that is the case. I don't think individualism is how we're supposed to live. Faith is not an individualistic thing because human life isn't. We are communal creatures. We need to journey together. We need to be with other people. But I think we can only journey authentically with other people when we learn to be true to ourselves. And I think the opposite of community is when you've got conformity, when you've got people who say to belong to us, you have to agree with us, you have to accept our outlook and go along with what we're saying. A real church, in my view, a real community of any sort is a place where we can have our individuality, but we can have our individuality as part of a wider community where we're all holding on to our own selves. So I think, you know, the journey home is about finding our own heart and being true to that. And I think perhaps, you know, as we sort of round off these thoughts, perhaps a fundamental thing that we need to return to is the thought that actually our deepest belonging as human beings is actually to this world, to the earth, you know, that we are, before we're human beings, we're earthlings. And I think that's really what we're suffering from now as we drift, or as we're plunged into a climate change that is increasingly a reality. The world has already changed and is changing all the time. And I think one of the deep causes for what we're doing to the world is that we've lost our sense of belonging, our sense that Mother Nature is our mother, that the earth is our home, that deep connectedness. You know, maybe someone with a quite famous voice can help us just to think about this.
I am home. I give you comfort. I shelter your family. See me for who I am. Home, sweet home. I am your refuge. I am the floor that supports you, the foundation that keeps you steady, the walls that give you shelter, the roof that protects you, I am your home. If you don't take care of me, I cannot take care of you.
So I think these are the things that we can take from this evening, you know, the realization that home is where the heart is, but what that means is that we need to come back to our heart, to have faith in ourselves, faith in the God who is within us, and to journey home to authenticity within ourselves, but also to realize that we are at home within ourselves, but also part of being at home with a community of people who are journeying in the same way, and also that our greater home is this wonderful earth that we're a part of. So I think really the message of belonging and what that means to us is probably one of the most crucial things to consider today. So here's a prayer that I wrote earlier. Carnal God, whose breath sustained the universe for 13 billion years and more, who rides on storms, dances in bright woody glades, whose body bears feathers, fur, and human skin of many shades and colours. We rejoice in your dog voice, frog voice, robin, chaffinch, and warbler voice, in the croaking of your crow voice. Help us to love the beating heart within us, cherishing your blood in our veins, your evolving DNA in the cells of our body that maps the course of our existence. May we relentlessly come home to this earthiness, to the frailty and wonder of our mundane being, mortal, yet forever blossoming through your eternal breath of life. Amen. So I invite you to put your cameras on again now.